Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Have a Life Teaching Podcast. So, as many folks know, culture is really the determinant of what makes a school successful. So, in my coaching work, I might often have people asking me, well, what's the best type of school? Is it a traditional public school? Is it a non traditional public school like a charter? Is it private schools? What is the most successful school? And my answer to that is really it depends. It depends on the individual school leadership. So, even though there are proponents for one type of schooling over another, I'm not necessarily one of those folks. I'm definitely someone that believes in the power of leadership. So there are very good traditional public schools. There are very good private schools. There are very good charter schools. And there are also schools that are not good in any of those categories. And so, really, if you think about it, it does come down to leadership. And does leadership have a sense of what it needs to do to establish a strong school culture? How those pieces fit together? Is there actually a system to ensure successful, safe, nurturing school environments? And my next guest believes that there is, and I actually agree with him. My next guest is Dr. Samuel Nix. Dr. Nix is a chief academic officer in a traditional public school district. He is also the author of this brand new book that we're going to talk about tonight, Six Steps to a Strong School Culture, a leadership cycle for educational success. So we're really going to talk about that cycle in action and what leaders need to do step by step to better ensure, again, that their schools have the school culture and climate that is supportive for learning. Because as I'm sure my guests will say in our conversation, something that resonated with me when I read his book, and that is the purpose of school is not teaching. The purpose is learning. Again, we could teach all we want, but if the culture is not conducive for students to actually learn what they are being taught, us teaching is all for naught. So, very excited to have my next guest on the show talking about this topic. So, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today.
John, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the time. I am so excited to engage in this conversation with you and your listening audience, and so it's a privilege.
Glad to have you. We can never talk about school culture and climate enough to really talk about how we are going to make sure that teaching and learning is conducive for all students. So, Sam, one of the questions I like to ask folks right from the start is how did this become your area of interest? Why is school climate and culture so important for you?
It's so interesting that you asked that question. When I was in school, I really didn't have too many educators that were investing in me. Of course, I had two supportive parents, things of that nature. But I was in school, but I didn't like school. I did well in school, but school wasn't a place that I felt that I wanted to be or I wanted to even continue in. So when I graduated, I went to work for the railroad and did that for quite a while until I made the decision to come back to education. When we talk about school culture and why that's important to me, long story short, being a teacher, being an assistant principal, eventually becoming a principal, I became the principal of a middle school in the eighth largest school district in Texas. And the school that I became a principal of was the second lowest performing school in that district. When you're looking at a school of, I mean, a district of over 80 something schools, that's pretty low. I learned very quickly that the culture of the school was the thing that was keeping the school down, not the capacity of the children, not the ability uh, of the kids, not the parent. It was the way we thought about what we believed, how we approached those type of things that permeated this continued low achievement. In less than 3 years, we took that school from the second lowest performing to one of the top 10 highest performing schools in that district. And then after that, I was in the same district, the principal of a high school. That high school that I was the principal of was on CNN for the fights and the violence in that school. John, I don't care what you make it to CNN for. If you make it to CNN, it's big do it's big news, right? And so the fact that the violence, the gangs, the issues at that school made it to nationwide news, and then here I am now as the principal of this campus in this school. John, within 4 years, we were named as one of the top 30 schools in America for closing the achievement gap. So when I talk about culture, when I talk about what it takes to ensure student learning and to change a mindset, to change an environment, to change, it's important to me because I know that it matters. It matters when it comes to how people enjoy coming to work. It matters when it comes to students wanting to come to school. It matters when it comes to changing a perception of a parent to send the child to your school, like you mentioned in the beginning, whether it's a charter or public, whatever the case may be. Culture and how a leader either develops or sustains or degrades that culture matters. So that's why it is so important to me to help leaders, to support leaders, and to be alongside leaders as they think through not just how to have improvement methods, but how to develop a culture, a mindset, a behavior, a belief that is in alignment with students being successful.
And I'm glad that you mentioned your background being in troubled schools because I'm sure there would be people listening in today thinking, well, it's really easy to establish a culture from scratch. But, the fact that this method, the methodology you put forward, and we're going to talk about, again is going to work in schools that you're creating from scratch, but also no school is beyond hope, that there are those opportunities to take very troubled schools and turn them around using the same methodology. So I think that's important for listeners to know, to realize that it's a methodology that can work, hopefully, regardless of where on the trajectory in terms of the strength of your climate is. So then, Sam, before we actually get into the methodology, what were some of the issues going on at both the middle school that you had and the high school? What were some of those issues that were preventing overall strong school culture and impacting student learning?
John, I like to say it like this. The number one inhibitor to improvement is tradition. What we've always done, even what we have done that has experienced success. We are constantly changing. The climate is constantly changing. The landscape is constantly changing. And if we don't think about how to change and shift with that, our methodologies, the way we think, the way we approach, all of that is as traditional as it may be, it keeps us in the past. Well, we are educating students that for the future. And we've got to really think about what that means. Your question was, what were some of the inhibitors? What were some of the challenges? Number one, mindset. That's number one. The mindset of believing in self-efficacy, and the mindset of believing in those of whom you serve, the students, the staff, things of that nature. John, you said something at the top of this podcast that, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful things. John, nothing improves without leadership. Nothing. And so when you have a leader that is not well versed in how to shift mindsets or how to change a culture or how to support improvement, then you're going to have a leader that's working hard, that's passionate, that has great intentions, that loves people, and people may even love them, but it's most likely going to end up in stagnation or in regression, but definitely not in transformation. And so what I saw oftentimes is the mindset of the people, the mindset of leadership, what has been allowed or was being allowed, and mainly the culture, not the climate, the culture that was established at the school was one of apathy, one of an avoidance of accountability tied to support, and mainly one of a focus of teaching instead of a focus on learning. And so let me just, if you don't mind, let me just
Please.
kind of break that down for just a second. When I say a focus on teaching and not necessarily, I mean, a focus on learning, not just a focus on teaching, what I mean by that is not that teaching is not important. We have to ensure that we have quality tier one instruction. We have to make sure that we are supporting quality pedagogy. We have to make sure that we are investing in our educators and that our teaching is what it needs to be. But the focus can't stop there. The focus has to be on the whole purpose of teaching is to ensure learning. And in too many situations, and in too many schools, and in too many classrooms, the focus doesn't go to learning. And I simply ask those who negate that this simple question. Ask any child, John, go to any school across the nation, and I believe that the majority of what I'm saying will be true. Ask any child after class, what did you learn today? And you know what that child's going to tell you?
Nothing.
They're going to tell you what they did.
Right. I'm sorry. I'm gonna cut that part out. Could you repeat,
Right,
like,
right,
I was thinking like
right,
most of them are gonna
right,
say,
right, right, right,
like, what
right,
did you learn today? Nothing. So can
right.
you repeat back to when you asked the question? I think you
Yes,
like
yeah, yeah. So, John, it would be my estimation that the majority of children that you ask after a class, no matter what school that you go to, private, public, charter, it doesn't matter. If you ask them the question, what did you learn today? Do you know what they're going to say to you?
what are they gonna say?
Most likely, instead of telling you what they learned, they're going to tell you the activities that they were engaged in. Tell you probably, I learned math or I learned this, or right? But they're not going to, for the most explain to you critically, analytically, or to the standard what they learned, because that's not what we focus on. Or I found in those schools, you asked what were the inhibitors. When I'm talking to teachers or when I'm asking teachers to after class period, well, how many of your students learned at the level of the standard today? Because the focus was on the lesson, the focus was on the teaching, the focus was on the things that they were focused on, not necessarily what the students were learning.
And I apologize about this, Sam. It went in and out a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's the weather here's a little off. Is the weather there a little off?
It's a little rainy here.
So maybe that's what's causing it. I lost you when you were getting to crickets.
Okay. If it's okay, I'll just repeat that.
Yes.
Okay. Um, so oftentimes I would ask teachers to explain to me, or so that we can think critically about how many of your students learned at the level of the standard today? And oftentimes there would not be a response because that's not what we were focused on. That's not what we were assessing. Lastly, John, I would tell teachers this when I hired them, and I did this for many years um, when I was building a culture, if you will, at a campus when it comes to focus on learning. Whenever I made a hire for a teacher, I would always say, I want you to remember one thing. I'm not hiring you to teach. And they would always look at me funny. I'm not hiring you to teach math. I'm not hiring you to teach our social studies. I've got news for you. Kids don't like social studies and kids don't want to come to social studies. I'm hiring you to ensure that students learn. And there's a big difference between our teaching, a focus on our teaching, and a focus on student learning. So if at any point in time you get more focused on your activities and your teaching than on student experience and their learning, you're going to be frustrated because I'm going to be supporting I'm going to be helping. I'm going to be pushing. I'm going to be side by side with you, helping you to focus on student experience and their learning more than your feelings and your teaching. And so that type of mindset, that type of conversation, that type of environment, that type of culture that is established starts to make a shift in the culture. It starts to make a shift of the focus. And when everyone is focused on student experience slash engagement and their level of learning and what they need to be successful as individuals, will start to make the type of transformational change that students deserve.
I'm so glad you mentioned that because even as a consultant, when I go in and work in schools, I'm always trying to get folks to go over the learning intention with students, go over the success criteria, talk about it with them, not just post it, but talk about it with them. And then at the end of the lesson, to go back to the students and ask them, did you meet this learning objective? Yes, no, and how do you know? Where's your evidence to back up your level of understanding? And if you haven't reached that level of understanding, what are some things that you can do, that I could do, that we could do to ensure you get there moving forward? So I'm really glad you mentioned as a part of strong culture, the focus on learning and the focus on student accountability as well as teacher ability. And I know, Sam, we're going to talk about core instruction as being one of the 6 steps when it comes to establishing a school culture. So I know we're going to get into that a little bit more, which is a nice segue into the question I'm going to ask now, which is, okay, so you sold me. We need a strong culture. I'm a busy school principal. I know I need to establish a school culture, but there are so many things I could focus on. Like I was just mentioning, there's academics, there's staff, there's school, feelings of morale. And there's so many different things I'm doing as a leader on a daily basis. I'm dealing with families and parents contacting me. So sometimes I might have the best intentions to improve the culture in my school, but I don't know where to start because there are so many different things going on. In a school that's troubled, fires are going on all over the place. In a school that's not troubled, that's just kind of muddling along, things are still happening all over the place. And I know for myself as a former principal, that was one of the hardest things about the job, which was making sure, and I didn't come up with this expression, I don't know who did, don't let the urgent supersede the important. So, and again, that instruction being core and the learning, not just the teaching, but the actual learning that kids leave the building with is of utmost importance. But let's spend some time. So, what are you advocating for in terms of these 6 steps to go from, say, 0 to 100 in terms of school culture?
John, before I answer that question, I'm going to start with an analogy. Okay. I apologize ahead of time if it's horrible. In my head, it makes sense. Okay. There, the analogy is that there are two individuals who are mopping because there's water all over the floor. And they are mopping feverishly because they need to get all this water up from the floor. One individual puts his mop down and walks away. And the other is saying, what are you doing? You've got to help me mop. We've got to get this water up. And I mean, they are mopping and mopping. The hands hurt so much. The arms hurt so much. The muscles are sore. They are mopping to the point where they are just tired and sweating. And the audacity of this individual to put the mop down and leave me mopping all by myself to get all of this water up, to work so hard. They know how hard I'm working, and to walk away while I'm mopping. And about 10 minutes later, the other person comes back, picks up the mop, puts it in the bucket, And the guy said, where have you been for 10 minutes? I've been working so hard. I've been mopping. I've been getting. They said, oh, I went to cut off the leak. And that's what school leaders, unfortunately, have been relegated to. They mop and mop and mop and mop. And just like you said, I have been a principal. You have been a principal. You work with principals. But principals are so busy. Mop, I think somebody put it like this: are you a firefighter or a fireman, right? Or a fire starter, right? There's all kind of euphemisms for how we prioritize our work, things of that nature. But the reality is the leader that does not develop the skill to identify root causes and develop a framework of thinking of how to address things in such a way that they're not pulled in every direction, that leader will always be relegated to circumstances and situations and other people's priorities and other people's issues and other people's time. And the likelihood of them being successful is diminished.
That makes total sense to me, Sam. Again, I'm sure you've heard this expression: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So the analogy you gave is perfect because I agree with you. I think as school leaders, we're going from crisis to crisis to crisis without actually looking at often what's causing the crises. And if we establish some systems and procedures, maybe in the future will prevent the crisis from happening in the first place.
John, schools all across America, you may see something different because I know you work with so many leaders and so many campuses, but you just take assistant principals, right? What most assistant principals will tell you takes up the majority of their time: student discipline, right? I've got to handle all this student discipline, so forth and so on. And when I work, and let's just take the analogy I use before getting into the cycle, the framework, right? Um, so they work all day trying to address student discipline, trying to work and coach students, trying to identify issues, trying to investigate different parts. And then the minute they get one referral, here come three more kids, and they're dealing with a fight, and they're dealing with this situation, during this referral, they're dealing with this pop, they're dealing with all this stuff, right? Day in, day out. It is so hard to get into classrooms. It's so hard to coach teachers because the majority of their time dealing with arts and dealing with disciplines and dealing with parents and dealing with the investigation, dealing with all this stuff. And and how often have we stepped back and looked at, of 1,000 kids, how many of these students are actually causing or behavior problems on a consistent basis? Of those students, do we have teachers that the majority of these students are seemingly misbehaving more in because they're not engaged, or they're bored, or there's no discipline accountability in the classroom? So at what point do we then see, well, 20% of our behavior problems are coming from really these four teachers? So if we were to understand, oh, they might need support in this area, I may need to coach them. I may need to invest in them. I may need to ensure that they are comfortable with. I may need to make sure that we provide information for and really work to ensure that they have what they need. Because if I turn the spigot off, going back to my analogy, with these four teachers and give them the confidence and the skills and the resources and the coaching, what does that do to now all this discipline that I'm dealing with? Or if students are actually engaged in the learning to where they enjoy coming to that class and they want to be there because their experience with the learning is on a different level, or I'm teaching the teacher how to respond appropriately instead of how to react, and then how to think. What now happens to all of this discipline that I've been dealing with? Now the question is, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, then we address that. But too many leaders are so reactive to the things that are happening instead of thinking through what are the trends, what's the analysis of the things that are happening, and then how do I address it in such a way with my leadership skills and my leadership capacity to help make a difference. John, you just said, when I go into campuses and I'm working in classrooms, I'm having to coach them to go over what the student is supposed to learn. I'm having to coach them at the end of the lesson to see what evidence they have. Did the student learn it? Do you know why you're having to do that? Because
Culture.
they're not focused on learning.
Exactly. And you know, what really resonated with me and what you were just saying is, again, that word reactive. I'll give you an example. I was coaching in it wasn't New York City, it was another city, and I was working specifically with assistant principals. And this illustrates your point to a T. And the assistant principal and I were about to go in and observe instruction in different classes. And a parent came, and he was expected to drop everything. And he was expected to drop everything by the principal and to deal with not so much the child, because the child had done whatever the child had done previously. The mother was there. And again, I'm not saying, Sam, that it's not important to talk to families. It's clearly very important. But this child had been in trouble for this same thing 4 or 5 times. This was the fourth or fifth time this AP was talking to this parent. And he dropped everything, including our walkthrough, to go talk with this parent. And when he came back, which was an hour later, an hour and a half later, I said, you know, I understand you need to talk to these parents and this parent, but did this have to happen right now? Well, the mother was here. I understand that, but you've dropped everything 3 and 4 other times to meet with her. At a certain point, you got to say, I will get back to you, but I'm in the middle of walkthroughs right now. Because ultimately, you're spending all this time on this situation when you're not getting into classrooms where there are 30 other students sitting at a time. And maybe if we went into those classes and saw what was going on, we could, to your point, fix the problem, quote unquote, at its root. So this makes total sense to me, Sam.
John, what you just described is mindset. That principal doesn't mean any harm. That assistant principal doesn't mean any harm. They are trying to honor the time of the parent. They're trying to make sure that they listen. They're trying to make sure that they address it. The mindset, however, is that any parent, the culture, any parent that is upset or demands to meet with you, that we are going to not prioritize the 1,000 students that we have, building the support and understanding what's going on structurally in our campus. It's, we don't want you going to central office. We don't want you calling saying that we're not responsive. We don't want you calling the board. We're going to stop everything and address you. And you know what you're going to have to do the next time a parent comes in and demands to talk to you when they want to talk to you? The same thing. And so when we talk about shifting a culture, it's about honoring the parent. It's about respecting the parent. But like you said, John, it is about making sure everybody understands what we prioritize. Yes, ma'am. I need to spend 5 minutes understanding what your challenge, your situation, your whatever it is. I'm getting into classrooms. And if you will allow me 24 hours to understand whatever and get back to you, or 40, whatever that looks like, everybody understands your prioritization is student learning. And,
Exactly.
and if that's not the case, from the principal to the AP to the teacher to the whoever, you are setting yourself up to mop and mop and mop and mop on a floor that will always be wet.
I agree. So then, Sam, let's get into it. So let's get into the 6 steps to establishing the strong school culture that's going to help us shift that mindset. What are these 6 steps?
John, thank you. The 6 steps are, before I get into that, the 6 steps derive from the decision-making theory. And they derive from really the mindset of, and I took this from the ADM, the aeronautic.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Hello, sir. I don't know what's going on.
Oh, I have no idea. It just cut off, and I was like, "Where did John go?"
Yeah, I was like, where'd he go?
I don't know.
So,
Okay, so are
I
you okay for me to
lost.
jump back in?
Yeah, I lost you when you were about to say ADM and what it was, and so whatever you said after that, I didn't get.
Okay, so let me start by answering your question first, and then I'll go from there. You asked me, what are the 6 steps? Step one is clarifying the mission. Step two is strategically planning and decision making. Step three is empowering self and others. Step four is measurement and feedback. Step five is adjusting and improving. And then, of course, step six is accountability and or rewards. So if you will allow me, that seems simplistic, but it is so critical. You know, John, I spent a lot of time in leadership classes, as I'm sure you have. I spent a lot of time in my undergrad, my doctoral work, my superintendency work, all the classes that I've taken in leadership. They taught me a lot of things about leadership. But you know, one thing in one class that I really wasn't trained in, maybe you were, but I find that this is lacking in so many preparation situations when it comes to leaders. They never taught me how to think. They taught me theory. They taught me frameworks. They taught me all kind of stuff. But the number one thing that a leader has to do well is think. Leadership is a thinking game. So the framework, the 6 steps to the leadership cycle, if you will, derived from the leadership. The decision making theory, and it derived from um, something called the aeronautical decision making theory. That's called ADM, and ADM is something that pilots are trained on. And it's funny. I was waiting on a flight one time in American Airlines, and there was a pilot that was sitting there, and I asked the pilot, "Are you familiar with ADM?" He says, "Of course, we're all trained on this." And it is phenomenal when you look at the research. And I'm going to say this, and I hope I can do it justice. John, think about this for a second. When you're in the air on a flight, you're somewhere that you weren't meant to be. When you are on the flight in the middle of the air, right? That's a very vulnerable place to be. When a pilot makes a mistake, what's the cost? Lives. There are things that pilots cannot control. Pilots can't control thunder, John. Pilots can't control turbulence. Pilots can't control tornadoes. Pilots can't control lightning. Pilots can't control birds flying into engines. There are so many things that pilots have no control over when they're in that environment. Yet, what the airline industry learned through, and the research is out there for everybody to read, it's phenomenal. By taking the pilots through a systematic, intentional way of thinking about the flight, about their preparation for the flight, and even after the flight, they were able to reduce accidents by human error by 48.2%. That's in the research. And by just taking them through a process of thought, they were able to reduce accidents by weather-related incidents by 78.4%. John, that may not mean anything to you or your listeners, but you mean to tell me that just by teaching a pilot how to think and strategize and plan appropriately, that you can reduce accidents and errors of things that they have no control over by 78.4%. You started this, and I've said it before, leadership matters. And how a leader thinks, how a leader prepares, how a leader strategizes about their people, their work, the outcomes, it matters. So the leadership framework or the leadership cycle is a framework for leaders to teach them, to show them how to approach all of the things that you mentioned earlier that take our time, our attention, how to approach it in such a way that we minimize errors, gaps, challenges, obstacles, and maximize the opportunity for success.
And you know, Sam, that makes a lot of sense to me because, again, getting back to, avoiding crisis thinking or crisis management, we as human beings do not do our best thinking in the middle of a crisis. So avoid the crisis, plan for the because I actually had, it's funny we're talking about this. I had on a previous episode the authors, Jerry Parscale was one of the people talking about schools preparing and leadership preparing for the unexpected, having like a coded system for dealing with certain types of issues and ensuring in advance of any issue, people were aware of who was on that need to know basis and on that team, if you will, in dealing with that issue. Now, in Jerry's case, it involved her son, who was unfortunately going through a terminal illness. And some days he was able to deal with academics and some days not. So his principal, Darcy Krause, and Jerry and Darcy is also a co-writer on their book, decided that there needed to be systems in place beforehand, so that way when both of them were consumed by grief and worry, that they already had done their thinking when it was clear. And that enabled them to support Jerry's son to the best of their ability without waiting for those times when he wasn't as uh, up to learning as he was at other times. So when you're talking about the pilot's ADM, again, that makes sense Because just like a pilot can't make mistakes because lives are at stake, I would argue we as well can't make mistakes. Now, they don't have the immediate life and death consequences, but they add up. It's a death by a thousand cuts. Students don't learn. The gap gets bigger. The next year they don't learn. The gaps get bigger. The next year they don't learn in a school where there is not a strong culture. The gaps get bigger. And at a certain point, you run out of, excuse the metaphor, runway to meet that child's needs. So developing a systemic approach to planning out how you're going to manage, synthesize, strategize, it makes sense to me completely.
Well, to your point, John, you said, we can't make mistakes, but you said death by a thousand cuts, and you're correct. And it's not that we don't make mistakes because we learn through mistakes. The problem is we keep making the same mistakes.
Exactly.
Right? We keep making the same mistakes. And what we focus on is we want people to really highlight, celebrate, and recognize our hard work. And unfortunately, John, hard work is good, but hard work doesn't always translate into improved cultures or environments for children. Just hard working doesn't do it. Strategic, intentional hard work does. So we have to start thinking strategically and intentional. So if you don't mind, I'd like to unpack just for a second the 6 steps
I
briefly.
love it. I was going to go there. So go for it.
So number 1, first step, clarify the mission. And what does that mean? The biggest mistake when it comes to communication is the assumption that it actually happened, right? And what most leaders do, because they're so busy, right? We're so busy. I'm so busy. I've got a million things to do, a million balls in the air, right? And I'm not being funny. I'm right? I'm busy now as well, right? But what happens is we get so focused on how busy we are that we stop to think about the quality of the things that we're doing that we do have time to do. Clarifying the mission. The hardest thing to do is something that you're not clear about. And with leaders, oftentimes, I'll ask them, how did you ensure that they understood? How did you ensure communication? Well, I emailed them. That's not effective communication. Well, I told them. Well, that's not effective. Well, I wrote them. Well, that's not effective communication. And so really helping leaders understand, what does effective communication look like, feel like, sound like, and how do you ensure that your intended message was the message that they took away from your communication. That's a skill. That's a strategy. The great thing is that we all have what it takes to do that. We just have to slow down, implement that skill, and move forward in such a way that people clearly understand what we're trying to say. And email is not effective. And that it doesn't help. Having a meeting and just telling people, it's not effective communication. So what is it? How do I develop it? What are the strategies for it? And how do I start to develop that as a part of just who I am and how I communicate as a leader? That's step 1. Step 2, strategic planning and decision making. To your point with the guest that you had, what's the difference between planning and planning strategically? Who needs to be a part of that? What does it look like when we're making decisions and when do we need to make decisions, and when do we need to let things play out, and when do we need to trust the process, and when do we need to understand that the process is no longer working, we need to make shifts. All of those things are part of how we build skill set, how we think through this, but it doesn't just come in. We've got to learn these skills. Step 3, empowering self and others. And really what that looks like, John, is making sure that we're not reactive. We understand what our week is going to, at least we can anticipate things for the week. We can anticipate what's coming. We can be knowledgeable of those things by putting ourselves in really good positions to know, to learn, and to help other people get experiences with that of which we are trying to help them understand, powering them. The 4th step in the leadership cycle, I believe, is probably one of the most neglected steps in leadership. and that is measurement and feedback. John, how many times do we start initiatives or leaders start initiatives? They're clear about the mission. Oh, they strategically plan. Great. They involve the right people. They empower themselves and others, but there's no cadence for what they're measuring. There's no cadence for how they're looking at evidence and when they're looking and providing quality feedback on that thing so that people can improve. John, nothing improves without feedback. Nothing in life improves without feedback. Everything that everything that improves has to have feedback to get better.
So when you're talking about feedback, what specific feedback are you talking about?
Well, it depends on what you're. Let's just let me pause for a second. For leaders, giving feedback to people on their progress, on things that they can improve on that actually helps them improve on that thing is what I call quality feedback. We oftentimes may give feedback, but it doesn't help the person understand what they're doing wrong or how to do it better. I call that not quality feedback. Just look at what we do with kids in the classroom. We give kids homework. If they do the homework, right, they turn it back, or they do something in school, we have their paper. If they miss 5, we put -5, we put X's on it, give them a 95 and give it back. And we call that feedback. People want to do a good job, John. People want to get better. And as leaders, it's our job to show them how. So feedback helps an individual understand what they did well, and feedback helps an individual understand how they could do it better.
I like that you say that because when I go in and coach, and I know when I've received feedback, although it never feels great to receive negative quote unquote feedback, if it's being done with the intention of improving me or helping me improve, and I'm given resources to improve, I at least appreciate it. And in the long run, grow from it. So hopefully I don't keep getting that negative feedback. So I have learned from my experiences of not getting feedback that helped me grow in my coaching to try to give that feedback. So when I was a sitting CAO, if I said, you can engage your students a little bit more, I always try to put some more information. Go look at these resources. Go look at these people. Go look at these particular pages, this chapter, and to learn some of the strategies that you could adopt. I will come in, I'll help you model if you want me to help you, model it for you. And a lot of that same type of feedback I gave as an administrator, I give as a consultant. I mean, it's not that I'm more their peer now than their supervisor, but again, the process is still similar. I think you hit it on the nail on the head when it's really about helping people get better,
But
so
John,
that way they do continue to grow.
everything that you just said, as a consultant, you have a certain skill set. That's why people keep calling you to come help, because you're good at what you do. You didn't just wake up and just go say, I'm gonna be a consultant to go help people, right? You're good at what you do. And what the book is designed to do is to help leaders develop the skill set in these 6 areas so that it's not a heavy lift. It's not something that's hard. It's simple. Here are the strategies. Here are the things for you to consider. Here's what quality feedback actually looks like, sounds like, feels like. Here are some ways that you can start to incorporate that in your conversation. Oh, by the way, here are the things that here's how you're actually hurting your people, hurting your organization, and not developing growth-minded individuals when you neglect to give it, or when you give feedback that's not actually quality, that's making people feel good but not get better. So that is the 4th step that's so neglected in leadership. The 5th step is making adjustments and improvements based on that feedback, and how to think through that, how to strategize for that, and how to help build capacity in that in others, and when to make those adjustments. And then lastly, accountability and rewards. So often I find that leaders don't communicate well, which is the first step in the leadership cycle. They don't ensure that people understand. They're not clear, but they want to jump to the sixth step in the leadership cycle, which is holding people accountable. And they haven't gone through to self-reflect on, as a leader, how they have thought through or supported thinking in themselves or others to ensure that that thing, that person, that initiative is successful. So, John, those six steps of the leadership cycle are proven, whether it's in education, whether it is in business. And here's the problem: well, it's not even a problem, but you, as a high level consultant, you do these things innately. This is why you're successful. You do these things and you coach other people to try to think through, but sometimes we don't know what bucket to put it in. But it's a framework of thinking that, when done well, maximizes your potential for success and minimizes your potential for gaps and challenges.
I like how you said when done well, because as you were talking, Sam, I'm wondering. So I'm an administrator. I'm going to use the six steps. What are some maybe 3 to 5 practices you would recommend administrators adopt so they can ensure that they are implementing the 6 steps with fidelity?
Number one, they have to make a decision that they want to get better. Now, I know that may sound crazy, but when you read books like Atomic Habits, when you read books like The One Thing, the most important thing is you have to make a decision. I don't care what you're doing in life. I don't care whether you're on a diet and trying to lose weight. I don't care whether you're trying to, it doesn't matter. Whatever your goal is, you have to make a decision that you want to improve. What I have found, John, is that most of the time we work hard at something that's not working so that we don't have to think about how to make it work better. The number one step in strategy is, do I actually want to get better? Do I actually want to commit to learning, applying what I've learned, and really going through the frustration of understanding that I may not know it all and I may not be perfect and I have areas to grow, and I'm going to make a decision to be intentional about improving? That's number one. Number two, it's, you asked about a quick strategy. Number two, it's understanding that your perspective and perception is not the only perspective and perception. The whole point of the leadership cycle is getting outside of yourself and really understanding the people that you serve, the people that you lead, the outcomes that you're trying to get to. It's really, whether it's number one, which is clarifying the mission or empowering others or strategically planning or giving feedback, you're getting outside of you and you're listening, you're understanding, and you are reflecting from another perspective about how your leadership is impacting them. So let's take communication. Well, what's the number one strategy? Easiest thing. You're listening. You're actually hearing what people are saying and really hearing to see whether they understand or not, and not so much focused on your talking. You're actually giving feedback from the perspective of that it can actually help them and actually give them something tangible that they can move with, instead of just saying, "Oh, I gave them feedback." Because when you do that, your focus is on you, your actions, your intelligence, your gift, instead of them, their understanding, their perspective, and what they can take from this to be better. So
I'm
number one.
almost thinking of, when you say that, I'm thinking of organizations. I don't know if I have this name right. 360-degree review loops where subordinates give feedback to the manager. And I'm also thinking about the times that I and other consultants that I know have done focus groups with folks around how they feel a school can get better. And the leader is asking the questions and facilitating the conversation, but not necessarily providing the answers. The answers, the thoughts are coming from the staff. Those thoughts are being collected and recorded, and then admin is looking at the responses across different focus groups that might have been held to see if there's a common thread, both pros and cons, and glows and grows when it comes to the school culture. What is your thought on those types of practices to solicit feedback the other way from subordinates up?
Well, I do it. I coach people to do it, and I think it's good. I also think you need to create a safe environment for those subordinates. So it probably most likely needs to be anonymous until or unless you have a culture where people feel free and feel vulnerable to give you feedback out of, so that there's no retribution
Sure.
of retaliation. But that was going to be my third point, and I want you to notice something, John. And I see this often. Most people will always try to relegate a solution to a technical solution. Hurry up, give me a quick thing. Give me one quick thing I can do. Give me one this, that, and third. Give me one
Just
thing.
like I did
Right,
to you. Give me 3 to
right,
5.
right. And that here's the problem. I talk about this in the book. We try to fix adaptive challenges with technical solutions. And that's why we keep having problems. And that's how you do not change a culture. Culture is mindset. So if you notice, my answers to you had everything to do with how the person was thinking, how they thought about the decisions they were going to make, how they thought about other people's perspectives and honoring them, how they lessened their ego to maximize the other person's perspective, and ultimately how they receive feedback from other people to get a good barometer of, am I really as great as I think I am? And what areas do I need to focus on to improve? And the areas that I am great in, let me just keep doing those things, but honing them and sharpening them so I can get even better. So in the book, after every chapter,
Hey, Sam.
hey John,
This is the most challenging interview I've ever done for two
no,
seasons on my podcast.
I'm
Not the
sorry.
guest, not the conversation, the tech. This is the most challenging. All right. So continue. Before you do, what I was going to say is let's talk about work. If you've done work in other schools, how you help leaders implement this, like, as a mentor, like how you recommend leaders find mentors in the six levers, the six steps. Anything we have, and then I'll ask anything we haven't talked about, and then where can people find you? How about that? All
Perfect.
right. So you were talking about in the book there are templates.
Yes, that's one of the things that is so helpful, and I appreciate my publisher, Solution Tree, for helping to really flush that out. Because the templates help the leaders not only themselves, but they can share with others to do exactly what you just said. For example, the leadership cycle analysis. It takes the leader and or their team through each section of the leadership cycle to see what's the culture of our organization when it comes to clarifying the mission. And it has specific questions based in research to help give the leader feedback tied to a score of where their culture is in relation to their leadership and what areas they can grow in and what areas they're strong in for every section of the leadership cycle. That is one of the things when I work with schools all across the nation, much like yourself. I just left a school district in Oklahoma City. And it was so eye-opening for the principal. I just worked with another principal in West Texas. The principal was like, this was so helpful for my team, for myself, because it really walks them through where they're strong in their thinking and in their support of their campus and in their culture, and where they have areas of needed support, and then helps walk them through what to do based on those areas. So, book is a great resource to help leaders think, plan, transform their culture, but ultimately, the book is designed because when great leaders actually operate in their greatness, teachers are better, schools are better, and ultimately students achieve better results, enjoy, and have a much greater experience in schools. And that's the purpose of schools, all schools.
And what I really like hearing, Sam, is again, you were saying before that one of the most important things in implementing the cycle is a self desire as a leader to improve. So, one thing I like about your templates is that, again, it provides an opportunity for leaders and their teams to be self reflective. It's not coming from the outside, it's not being superimposed on them. And because it's self paced, if you will, hopefully, and nobody's necessarily looking at it, like your superintendent is not necessarily looking at it. Hopefully, it encourages leaders to be honest with themselves about where their strengths are, because we all have strengths, but where those opportunities are in improving our practice to serve as servant leaders, to help those serving students, we need to help them as well. So I really like how, like you said, this has been eye opening for that school district, particularly in Oklahoma, because again, it matches desire to change with tools to change.
Hmm, that's
So
so
I
true.
so I like that. I like that. So now, Sam, where can people find out more? Or actually, before we go that, so Sam, we talked a lot about the cycle of improving school culture. What did we not talked about that you think it's important for our listeners to know?
John, first of all, I just want to appreciate you and your listeners because platforms like this create a safe space for people to learn and get better from experts like yourself. And so, what I just want people to know is we in education have a mandate, not for schools, not for kids in charter schools, not for kids in public schools, not for kids in private schools. We have a mandate for all children to grow, to get better, to be our best because they deserve it. Not because we have some kind of agenda. We have a mandate to get better as leaders. We have a mandate to improve as teachers. We have a mandate to improve as a system because our children deserve it. And so, books like mine and others are simple resources to help that process of getting better, being better, doing better, so that our kids can do the same. All I want people to understand or know, whether you buy my book or not, my goal, my hope, my desire is that I can motivate or inspire someone to do better, to be better, because that's what I'm trying to do every day. Not because I have some type of agenda, but because those kids that I show up for every day, they deserve the best me. They deserve me growing and learning how to support them and how to help them and how to develop a system for them where they actually enjoy being and they actually learn while they're there. That's what I want your listeners to know. In my book, I would hope that they would read it. I would hope that they would buy it. But ultimately, John, I just want to encourage your listeners to keep supporting you, keep listening to your channel, keep sharing the message, because the people that you have on your platform, your level of expertise and what you're sharing is what we need to keep growing. And I just want to thank you for the platform.
Well, I thank you because I learned from every guest I have, and I learned a lot from you, particularly about being less technical and more focused on the people and the way people think and feel, not just the way we think and feel as leaders. I think that's an enduring understanding for me that's going to come from our conversation. Now, before we conclude, one thing as you were talking about your work with in Oklahoma and Texas, have you set up, or is there any way for school leaders, if they want, to mentor each other through the cycles? Or is there any kind of mentorship you would recommend for folks who want to do this work and improve their leadership?
Mentorship is always a great idea. I have not personally set up a network of mentorship. Of course, I work as a consultant like you to work with these particular companies. But book studies, connections, those things are always very important. Mentorship is probably one of the most important things a leader can do, to get with other individuals who are doing or who have done what you're trying to do. Very important. People can get in contact with me through my website, which is snix3consulting.com. Once again, snix3consulting.com, through Twitter. Very, very well versed on Twitter and on Facebook. But my main goal, or they can order the book through Solution Tree. The name of the book, once again, is 6 Steps to a Strong School Culture, or on Amazon. And any individual that wants to connect with me, have me to come out, have me mentor, have me train, have me teach, going through Solution Tree is a way to do that. So when you go to solutiontree.com, either to the book or to the website, and just type my name in, that's a very easy way to get a hold of me through Solution Tree. And so, to your point, mentorship is key because we don't know it all. We're learning, we're growing, but when there are individuals who have excelled in the area that you are trying to excel in, it's always wise to learn. It's always wise to grow. It's always wise because, like you said, John, as many people as you talk to and as much as you are in the work, you just demonstrated. Hey, Sam, I learned from everybody I'm on this podcast with. I learned from you. I learned from others. I continue to grow. And yet you're an expert in this field. You are an example of what growth mindset is. You are an example for your listeners, for me, of what it means to never stop learning for children. So that, to me, is what mentorship is about. That's how you can get in touch with me. That's how you can get in touch with the resource.
Well, Sam, thank you for all the kudos. I'm humbled. And again, I really appreciate you coming on, talking about the cycle of developing a strong school culture. I do hope that our leaders out there listening to this podcast do take a look at the resources you provide. I did look at the templates, by the way, and I do agree with you. I think they are very helpful for that self reflective feedback to give ourselves, because their kids, like you said, do deserve it. Every one of our students deserves to be in a school that is going to help them learn. And every student, not every student gets it, but every student does deserve an equal high quality education. So, Sam, thank you so much for your time today. This has been a great conversation.
John, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Hang on. So, how do you think that went?
Well, John, I feel good about it. I enjoyed talking to you. I don't know if it was on my end or yours, but I apologize for all of the technical challenges. I know it was,
Stop.
you know,
Stop.
make you
I
look,
was
yeah.
gonna I was gonna say a bad word. S happens. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I'll fix most of it through editing.
Yeah.
Maybe one or two words got clipped with the
Yeah.
garbling on my end or your end. Don't worry about it. I'll figure it out.
Okay. All right.
All right, Sam. Great conversation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, John.
Cheers. Thanks.
All right.
I'll
Bye-bye.
let you know. It's gonna be a while, but I'll let
Okay.
you know when it posts.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, we'll do. Thanks. Bye.